Good morning, everybody. It's David here with BeckerArt, and this morning you're painting with me. Actually, I'm painting with myself in the studio, and so we're gonna be doing something I'm going to try and work a little bit tough. I haven't done a portrait in a long time, and I'm trying to do a little bit more portraits and trying to make them a little bit abstract in some ways. And so we're just in the studio with David, and you're gonna just watch me trying some different things, and that's what I'm doing every Sunday morning. And it's getting cold outside, and so I'll probably be inside more. When it's nice outside, I do go outside and do the plein air stuff for you. And we may do something coming up and outside when it's cold, but for right now, we're going to keep it inside for a little bit. And I did do it 8:30 this morning. Usually I do it at 9, but since you got an extra hour of sleep this morning with the extra time that we had to go back in back in time, so we just thought 8:30 is halfway in between. And so let's get going here. Let me just talk to you a little bit about the value study. So here's what we're painting, and what I want to do here is I want to kind of take the black and white of this image and show you that it's really important to know what your lights and darks are. And of course, you know that if you follow me on Thursdays, that you do your lights first, and then you get your middle tones and darks. And so basically, I got to make sure that these lights, those are my lights. And so that's part of the composition, that I keep those light. Now, they can be any color, but I got to make sure that these lights are the light part. And like a lot of middle tone, like right in here, there's a lot of middle tone, the top of his hat and stuff. And that's, this middle tone I'm going to put towards the dark, and some middle tones I'll put towards the light. This middle tone, I kind of like this middle tone to be probably part of the dark, because I like how this light is then just surrounded by the darks. And even if you have some middle tones, that's fine, but keep them towards the dark then. So follow your value pattern, and I like to make everything black and white to see, and then choose where your middle tones are going to go. And so this is one of the most important things about this thing that we're doing today is that, or that I'm doing today, is that my drawing is right on, because when it comes to a portrait, make sure that you have a good drawing. It's so important. And there's many different ways. And this week, follow me this week in my newsletter, because I'm going to show you a new thing. I just worked it this morning on my phone. It's called DaVinci Eye, and it's a way of using your phone to draw. It's basically tracing. But again, like I was talking in my newsletter this week about tracing, when you're tracing, you can also help yourself learning how to draw in your tracing, and so that you're looking at big picture and stuff. And again, drawing is a big important part about art in general, but there are materials now and instruments that help you out with that. And so yes, it's tracing, and no, it's not cheating. There's many people that trace. Let me tell you, if you look at all the award winners and some of the shows that are out there, I can guarantee you they're tracing their imaging, especially when it's high resolution or high definition stuff that they're doing. They're not drawing that stuff on. And so, it's very good to learn how to draw from your imagination and from your head, which I'm bringing out a book to how to do that hopefully soon. And but let me get right to this, and this is gonna be kind of fun. I'm actually looking forward to do. I've been studying this all morning and stuff. I'm gonna use a little bit of gouache also, probably, because I want to do what I want to do is I want to make the image, get those lights and darks definitely. And I actually put it right here. I put the black and white because I really want to make sure that you realize that the pattern after the drawing is number two. Number one is a drawing, having good drawing. And like I said, there's many different ways you can trace. You can now have this thing called DaVinci Eye, where you use your phone and you put it right above it, and you're actually drawing. It's puts those other little or those things that you do other ways out of the picture anymore. And nowadays with AI and everything, it's amazing how the AI, what it does, because you can get tips off of it. Actually, this morning I was looking at some images, and I picked out my color scheme, and my color scheme is going to be the red and the turquoise kind of green. This is going to be my two basic colors. I am going to add a little bit of purple, and so I'm going to kind of stick with those colors for my color scheme. So let's go right away with, and this is almost like what we did this week with the swans, in that it is not a landscape. And so a lot of times landscapes go from light to dark, I mean from back to front, because they're light in the back, and as you come forward it gets darker. Well, this is almost like a still life too, because the background is dark. And so that wouldn't start with the background on this because the background is dark. And so I also don't paint paintings by piece. So what I do is I paint by the big areas of light and dark, and that's like I do this right here. I make it black and white so I know what I have to do first. And my 3-step process is, of course, the lights, middle tones, and then darks, and then dark details. And middle tone and darks, that's one step, you know, but you may be doing it in 2 steps, but it is just considered one. Hey, Pat, Marie, and Sue. Thanks for stopping by. And we had yesterday in our class we had a sale of art supplies, and boy did we get rid of a lot of stuff. So it was really nice, and thank you for anybody who came to the used art supply. And basically a lot of us were just getting rid of a lot of our stuff that we don't ever use that much, but maybe can help another artist out. And so I had cleaned out a lot of my studio. I have so much stuff in my studio, so that was kind of fun. And we're maybe going to do that again in time. All right, so let's go right into doing our lights. And so basically, the only thing that's going to be white is basically the collar and the arm back here. His face has a little bit of light. Maybe the side of his nose has a little bit of light, but I'm not going to make that white. And even my whites, I'm going to put a little bit of something in there. And so I'm just going to wet his face and do my lights. You know, so I'm wetting. And you notice I'm using my smaller brush. I'm not using my big brush because I'm not doing such a big area of background or something. And so what I want to do is just basically first go with my lights and just get those little bit of light. I want to get the lights in my, or the shadows in my light. Basically the collar. I just want to get a little bit of that light in there, because I'm going to be going really dark, and I'm going to, like I said, I want it to be really dark, and I want to do a little bit of abstract onto it. I'm going to show you a little something I saw, and I want to really try it. I want to just see what it has. I may do some lines and rectangle shapes in it, making it more abstract, so it's not just a photo of this guy. I want it to be more than that. I want it to really look like something that's different, like a kind of style that has a little bit of abstract in it. So here we're doing, and so the white, I said, let's do the white. I'm going in here and getting my white, my light, the lights in my white. Basically the folds of his shirt is what I'm doing. And since I'm working light to dark, then I can go into other things that are going to be darker later. That's why you do it. That's why watercolorists do light to dark, so that you don't have to be so perfectly going around lines and stuff like that. And I was talking to some students yesterday about how it's kind of neat nowadays with the way watercolor is, and that we're starting to use a little bit of gouache in there. So the nice thing is that we get to do a little bit of both. Like we get a watercolor effect, and we also get kind of like an oil painting and acrylic effect too by putting it on thick. So I mean, not many don't do that, but I'm starting to really like that look of being able to do both. Like I can do my watercolor, but I can also get a look of a little bit of oils in there too. You know, why not? You know, by making a thick gouache, you can do that. I am going to make the tie. He has a black tie on. I'm going to make that tie red. And so let me just, I'm just going to put that in there right now. I'm going to make this tie red. And it is that way I'll give me something to guide myself from, and knowing how light this is. And it's going to be darker. It's going to be much darker. But now let's just go into let's go from left to right. I like to go left to right. That way I don't go over something when I get this done, to go over it and get this hand. So I might as well start with this hand, which is a light, my second biggest light area, right? So I'm going to wet the hand. And I am going to get right to the darks though, right away. I want to get the lights in there, but I'm going to try to go right into the darks of the hand also. So that you do the lights, get the color, but then I'm going to do step 2 right with step 1. You might as well get things accomplished and get them done. And that makes it look, that's very watercolor like, to make things very fresh and very, you know, right on. So I'm gonna give it a color, leaving the edges a little bit alone, leaving them alone so that they're light, almost white. But I'm working wet into wet, meaning that I want soft edges, right? And so I'm going in there. I'm taking a lot of my orange, my burnt orange, with a little bit of this purple. That kind of dulls it down a little bit. And also a little bit of this turquoise. And my turquoise, I'm using this Horizon Blue. And I actually got a turquoise in my gouache here. So I may put a little bit of that in there. And so just go right in here right now and get the exact values. I want to go in there. I know it's like kind of detail-y, but so it's almost like doing 1, 2, and 3 all together at once. But like I was talking with the swans this week, sometimes you have to do that because you have to do the big parts, but also might as well get it done with get your soft edges done and get the whole values, all the values all together at once. I am working on board, and I did wet that. Remember, I wet that area, so then I can just use thick amount of pigment. It's floating, and I'm gonna up the color from the sketch. I mean, the sketch is not very colorful at all, matter of fact, and so I'm gonna make it a little bit more than what I see. You know, why not? You know, make it a little bit more colorful. Keeping your values. That's what you got to remember. Keep your values to where there should be. And the edges are going to be soft because I wet the whole area. And yes, it is detailed. Basically, you're doing all three things at once. All three steps that are almost all coming together as one step. But this is a little bit more advanced. These are not paint-alongs. I'm just showing you what I'm just practicing. I'm trying to practice for myself because I want to do a bunch of entertainers. This is an actor, and entertainers or musicians, and I'm just wanting to do a lot of that. But I haven't figured out the style yet completely. I haven't figured out exactly what I want to do with the style of what the painting's going to look like at the end. Because that's important. You know, it's important to know what that's going to be, and I just have to practice. And this is my practice session on Sunday mornings. I just practice, and I don't plan on, this is not what I'm going to be showing. I just need to practice like any artist does. We need to practice ideas and techniques and on different papers with different brushes. And, you know, we all have to practice. There's nothing, you know, nothing comes easy. You have to just take your time and practice. So I'm wetting this area. If you have questions, please ask away. I'll look up every once in a while. Now, this is going to take a little bit longer than normal, so I think it's going to be a little bit longer, but we'll see. So I'm going to go here. This part is dark. You notice I'm using a little bit of gouache purple. Like I said, I'm using this color, which is a turquoise. And a red, all the reds and oranges, I'm using those, and I'm using purple. Those three colors are going to be most of what I'm going to be using. I'm going to stick with that, and then I'm also going to put some hard edge stuff in there where you're going to see that it's going to be very thick. Yeah, I'm going to go pretty thick, almost like an oil, but I'm doing that on purpose because I want to see what it'll look like. If I can get a neat effect, a neat style. Here's his knuckle. Again, that's all wet. His hand is all wet, and let's get some more warmth in there. And then down here is just the back side of his hand. And you know, I'm not doing big mediums like I normally do, big mediums and darks, because this is still my light. I'm still working on his face and his hands. Those are my lights. And so it just happens to be that that's the center of interest. So I have to work like I'm working step 3 because I got to get the light in there, but the light is my center of interest. So I can't just go, you know, wild and crazy with just putting a big brushstroke over it, because, you know, I have to make it look like the most important part of the painting. which it is. It's the center of interest and stuff, and his hand's got to look like a hand. So again, if it was like something that was not that important, then yes, I could do the big areas. And that's one thing about landscapes, is a little bit easier than it is doing things like something like this, because a portrait is, you know, if you off a little bit with the eyes or the nose or the hand, it's very noticeable. And so you want to make those things look a little bit better, and that's the drawing part of it too. I mean, the drawing has to be on. I'm still not super, you know, detailed. I am going pretty quickly, and I am just getting these big washes in there. So it's, you know, still, I can get more detail later in the end of it. But the soft edges, I want to kind of get, I want to get the values right away, and the edges I want to get right away. I don't want to wait for that. And because they're part of the light, I have to put part of the light in there. But there's also darks in my details here, and so I have to get that in there. There's no, I don't want to wait around and put it in later, because then it's gonna, I'm not gonna get the soft edges that I want. All right, so there's one hand. I know it's really weird to do this, to do, you know, doing my lights, but I've got my darks in there right away. But like I said, everything else is going to be dark around that, and so that's going to be then, this edge right there will be created by the background, and the background will be fun wash, but it's a little bit different from what I'm teaching you in my Thursday night paint-alongs, because a lot of you are not at this level yet where you can actually do some of the soft edges and create wet into wet and really control it really well. So, you know, I don't try to give you really hard things at first. You know, you have to build up to that. But then again, this is for me to just practice. I'm practicing, and just turn on my camera for you guys to see what I'm practicing. And if you want to try it, definitely go ahead. I do not mind that at all. And let's see. So the first thing would be the light color, which is this whole front of his hand here is kind of orangey, and I like to put a little pink in there, pink and red. And that's my light. You know, if you look at my light right here, look at this part right here, that picture shows me the top of his hand is going to be lightest, right? And so his fingers too are going to be lightest. Now his shirt back here is really light. So I'm just following my value pattern. And this side of his hand is dark, but it's soft edge. I want to get it soft edged. So here, there's my lights. Let's put some fun colors in there. That's not very light, is it? Let's get a little bit lighter. I wet it, and then I'm going to apply paint into that. Orange and red together. Sometimes brightness of color and intensity of color also is a way of making it look light, because the brightness and lightness all kind of combine together. So you can do that too. But like this arm down here is going to be really dark, and so I'm putting on water. But now let's get dark right away. I forgot to do his shirt down here with the lights, or with the shadowing. Let's put a little bit of that shadowing in too. Shadowing. Again, that's my lights. And I'm not steering away from the face. I could have done that first, but like I said, I like to work from left to right, because I'm, you know, right-handed, and so when I get this done, I can then just work on this. And so if I do this first and I'm going to do the hand, I could always drop stuff on there, and so I just like to work left to right. So let's get some darks in here. What did I use for my darks again? I used this nice dark and a violet, some nice violets. So his hand is really dark right here, hard edged. Kind of comes around, comes down. And next finger is dark until it gets to the next part there. Don't be afraid of using some really dark reds. And basically, I can also do these later on, but you know, if I can get them soft edge, that's the best. If I can get these washes, and if they're soft edge between the fingers, that's to me better than having it really hard edged. So, and we can also go back in later and also wipe out, you know, rub out, and that's actually a fun thing to do. Actually, is a kind of a neat thing to do because you can make it look like a soft edge. You know, I'm still working large areas. I know it's details, but it is a large area, and I don't have to get totally crazy with the exact detail. I can come back in and work that a little bit more. But the more you can do, where you're doing the hard edges and getting exactly the values that are supposed to be there, then that's best. You know, it's hard, but it's best if you can just go in and get one wash and get it done. This is wet, and so I'm wetting it, and then I'm pulling it in there. And I know this is very like piecemeal, but again, I'm getting my lights, and so it's a decent way of doing it. Wet in the wet. All right, FaceTime. And so now I'm just gonna wet the face. One more thing here. Looks like this got kind of. Let's put a little bit turquoise into this, into the dark. Okay, let's go in the face now. Look at how my towel, you know, I don't have any paper towel because I have a towel down on my whole table here. So I don't have to go in and I just tap it down here. Thanks, Maria. Yeah, it's a fun color palette. I think this is my favorite, some of my favorites when you're using red, and it's kind of a green, but a green blue. Morning, Rose, Betsy, Mary Beth, Darcy, Daniel, Sue. Thanks, everybody. Maria. Okay, let's wet this. Wet the face. Wet the face. I'm gonna go from top to bottom. Might as well start with his ear. Ears are pretty warm. Usually, a lot of times they're warm. Though, if I want to just get the overall color first, and then I'll get the shadowing. So first the overall color. First, the overall color, the light color. Now this hat is darker, so don't be afraid of going outside the line here. I don't need to go right on the line. Yeah, let's see, a little bit of pink. I use this yellow orange with this opera, and gives me a really nice kind of salmon-y flesh tone color. I don't have to make it really pink and stuff, and because you know, it's pretty dark, and so I'm using the white of the paper also to get it a little bit, go right over his beard and his stubble, because I can get that later. That's a dark orange, and up here it's a little bit dark. And so wet it pretty good so you get some time. You need some time to be able to, you know, establish soft edges and establish what's light and dark. And his nose is the lightest. And so, and then I don't have to worry about the beard and mustache. I can come in there later and get that. So here it's all wet, right? And I'm going to take some of this right into the background because I kind of like the look of some things dripping into the background where you don't see where the edges are. Lost edges, you know, that we're talking about that a lot lately. And so lost edges are good. We want that. Here we'll make it a little bit darker. Inside his ear. Might as well get the look of his ear, soft edgewise. It is in the back here, so I can get a little bit of that. The bottom of his ear. Shows a little bit darker here. And then he's got the beard, and so I'm just going to take a little bit of dark. And don't be afraid of using some of that color that you're going to use, like this blue. I'm going to put some of that in there. And making it soft edge is going to be kind of neat, making it soft edge. And so now usually the cheeks are rosier, right? Even on a guy, you can get a little bit rosier in his cheeks. A little bit more red in here. And I'm working soft edges, so just work it and make it clean. Make it clean and try to get your edges. Try to get your shapes. Get the values. It's a lot to work when you're doing a face, because if you're off a little bit with the drawing, you're off by a lot. And so you really have to watch your drawing when it comes to this part. So you're drawing and painting at the same time. You're putting your darks in. Get a little bit of violet in here. Like I said, a little bit more red in the area of his nose here. Let's see how dark I'm getting. I'm going really dark, and I'm going to use some of those colors that are going to be my cool. Like I'll put a little blue in here, reflecting. A little bit more warmth in the cheek here. It's wet, and so it's so wet that I'm using a lot of pigments, so it's still soft edge, but it's controlling it. I'm controlling it a little bit better because I need to control it. Now his bottom lip his lip on the bottom lip is colorful, right? And so let's get that in there. Like a nice orangey tone. And then we can take this other part, which we can do later, where we're doing the mustache. We don't have to do all of the darks right away. Then the wing of his nose here. And the front of his nose is a little bit darker. It's definitely controlling your pigment. You need to know how to control your pigment, how much pigment you're going to be using, how much pigment you need to make it stop in a wet wash so it doesn't bleed all over the place. And if I can get as much as I can done for the darks in the face with the first wash, the better. You know, I really would like to get a lot of this dark in there so I don't have to go back in, because the fresher you can make it look, the better it will look. I'm using pretty thick paints because I need to have it stop on a dime, but it's still wet, so I can make it look really soft edge, but get the values right away, because again, it's going to dry 20% lighter. These colors always dry 20% lighter. I don't have to put the eyelid or the brow in yet, but I'm going to put a little bit of dark for the eyebrow. And then I am not working with 300-pound cold press today. I'm working with a board. This is a watercolor board. Stonehenge is going to be making these boards, and they're not available yet. But this is a cold press. It's not as textury as paper, like an arches. It's kind of thinner, or not as, I shouldn't say, it's not as textury, but there's a little bit of grit. Make it a little bit darker here. Always watch how wet your brush is, because if you have too much water in your brush, that's gonna go into your wash. And so I know that exactly how much pigment, and I rub it down, and so my brush is pretty dry, and I can also make it a thirsty brush so that it pulls out while I'm putting it down. And not sure that's part of the paper right there. There's a little bit of something on the paper here that I must have erased there or something. So that's not good. So we're going to have to make it a little bit darker right there. Maybe make it a little bit orange, a little bit more pigment. And that's okay. We can make it a little bit different when it comes to the values. Now I'm starting to dry up here, and so let me put some of the. I'm going to take my smaller brush and get some of the some of his beard in there. I might as well get it in while it's soft, and even if it's a little damp, that's kind of good because I can get that in there already. Put a little bit of his beard in there. Because if it's a soft edge, then it's really nice. I mean, it's nice to put the beard in while it's soft edged, and his mustache, and because then it'll be soft edged, and not everything has to be hard then. And I'm kind of, my brush is pretty dry, and so I'm getting a little bit of a texture here. Go underneath his chin here. I'm stippling kind of in a way because it's wet, and so it's wet surface. And again, I keep on harping on this, but this is not my this is my third step, but I have to do it. I have to because I'm working on the portrait part of it, and so I know it was still part of my light, my first wash. But I don't have to. I did my big lights. I did those already, and so this is kind of like middle tones and darks. But I also have to put detail into this, so you might as well do that right away while you're doing the detail or you're doing the lights. And I'm gonna rub out for his mouth right here for his highlight. Let's put a little bit of gray in here and let that just bleed in so that you can't tell the difference between where his face stops and his beard stops and the background darks of his tie. Let's get this in here real quick. I don't use hot press for portrait work. You can, but you won't get as many soft edges. It's hard to get soft edges when it comes to portraits, and because it's nice to have these soft edges in here. And so to do that with hot press, it's very, very hard to get soft edges. I mean, you can get them. It's a lot tougher though. It's very, very tough, by the way. I love doing things with hot press. But portraits, I kind of stay away from portraits. Though this is, this is tougher board, so it kind of has that feel. But okay, so let's do our big mediums now, and let's go. I'm gonna go with my bigger brush, and so there's the basics of the lights. So my lights are all done now, and so now I'll be going into my darks, my large, mediums, and darks. And yes, there is detail in this, but that's still my light, my step one. It just combined with step 2 and 3, and now I'm going for my step 2, which is my large mediums and my large darks. So let me just start right in here, and I'm going to give him, like I said, I'm going to give him this turquoise kind of look up here where it's medium. And I'm still following right here. I'm still following this pattern of light and dark. I'm looking at that so that can go right into the face here. I'm just going to make that nice and dark and let that almost bleed into the face so that there is no difference. Because I have to follow. I want to follow the value pattern. To me, that's really important. And I'm going to, like I said before, I'm also going to do a little bit of abstract to this. So you're going to see I'm going to rush some lines through it and put some rectangles and shapes around places, and this should be fun. Look at how dark this is. Ooh, I'm using gouache so it covers up really well. And gouache, when you're using a lot of water, is okay because it'll still look transparent. but it is going to be matte. It's going to be a little bit more matte because it's made to cover up. It's made to be opaque, where watercolor is made to be looking transparent. So those are the two differences between, you know, gouache and watercolor. And you have to understand that so that when you're using watercolor that you're gonna see through it. And when you're using gouache, you're not gonna see through it. It's gonna be very matte, and it's gonna darken and not show your white paper. And that maybe is what you want anyways. So, you know, a little bit of both. I like doing a little bit of both. Like this black right here is gouache, and so it's going to just cover up. But I'm putting it down in a wet wash, so that's okay. I'm just kind of going in here, manipulating. This painting couldn't be then accepted into like a TWSA because I'm using opaque colors. You know, you wouldn't want to do use this for like a painting to enter into that show. It's just they want transparent, and so there you'd use transparent watercolor. See, I'm going right into the face. I'm going to put a little bit into the face so that I don't get a difference. I don't want to see the difference between where the face stops. I do want to show this red tie, so maybe make it dark right here. And I know it looks really, really dark, but it's going to make your lights look so much lighter. And it's going to give it that look that I want. I want those things to be dark so that it does show my lights really lightly. Now we have this cane. So I'm going to do the cane right here. I shouldn't be doing the cane right now because it's more of a detail. But since I have this color right here already in my hand, I had that blue, so I just want to make the side of it blue. And then we'll give it a little bit of red on this side too while it's wet. And then go right down to here, because this is all really dark in here. See how dark that is in there? So let's put a little bit of red right here. Because you almost can't see the difference between where the hand starts and where the hand stops when it comes to the value pattern. And I don't mix my blacks, and what I do is I just use a black and put color into it. Many people, teachers have taught their students, like myself included, were taught to mix our blacks so that they were more colorful. But I find it easier to just start with a black and put color into the black, and it becomes a very colorful, very, very dark color. And I'm floating it, so if I'm using watercolor, it's transparent, even though it's really dark and I'm covering up the white of the paper. And when we talk transparent and opaque, you know, when people talk about gouache, it is transparent if you wet it and use it very sparingly. It's still gouache, but it's still just pigment. And then, like right here, this is gouache. I use gouache, this black gouache, but it's going to cover up nicely, but it's still going to be transparent because I'm not using very much of it. And I should be doing this side left to right too, which I didn't do, but that's okay. All right, so let's do our left side here, and we're going to start with a really nice dark here. I'll use my bigger brush now because I'm working a big area, and I like to work big areas with a big brush. Lines, and so let's just wet it first. Now I'm going to dump a bunch of color. Now I'm going to start out with like my watercolor colors, and then I'll put a little bit of the opaques in there. Look at how much the opaques just take over, like when it comes to the watercolor, because it really the gouache really covers up because the pigment is so finely ground, and there's so much more pigment in a gouache than there is a watercolor. And that's, Holbein does that because they don't use whitening agents in their gouache. Instead, they use just very fine, lots and lots and lots of pigment. Look at how it just spreads out and covers instantly. Covers instantly. I'm just gonna let that run in here a little bit. Use some watercolor here to get it a little bit more transparent. I think the hand in the lower part looks too rounded. This part looks too rounded? Yeah, I have to cut into this a little bit more. I'm gonna have to re-wet that. Once it's dry, I'm gonna re-wet that and make it, because it's like you said, I don't see the top as much, and so I'm gonna make this part so it's a little bit, goes back a little bit. It's foreshortening, which is tough. And actually, this has to be a little bit downward in a motion like this, and this way. I should go down this way. Let me just keep on going with my background though. I gotta get that done before it dries. Oops. Went into the hand. That's okay. Let's use a smaller brush here for a second. And since I put red, and actually this is going to be lighter than the hat, so I might as well go right into the hat right away. I am going to go around this part. The top of the head, cool. And so this part will be darker, but I'm getting the lights, always light to dark, so I'm going to get that first. This is really dark right here. I'm going to be putting opaques on top of this. You're gonna not like that, but I'm going to show you a way of doing something that I've been trying to do. I'm trying to do a little abstract and stuff, and so many people will be like, "Why are you doing that to the top of that? It looks already good with the watercolor wash," but I have to try this new technique. So let's just get the lights in here. Actually, let's get the cool parts because I want to make that cool. I'm making sure I have the rim of the hat still in play. Up here it's really dark. It's amazing how dark gouache, how easily it covers. And you can't probably see that from this camera, but there's a lot of color in there, more than you'll actually see in the camera. Like I'm still going to put colors in here. Put some blue in here. And actually, I'm going to go right in here because that's going to be darker anyways. Make that a soft edge. Top of the hat can be a soft edge. This is going to be an edge that's going to be okay. Sorry, I'm concentrating a little bit here and trying to figure out what the next thing to do is. Okay, so a really dark, what I want to do is do a really dark right here. And then the edge of this hat gets really dark right there. And these are such slight differences of light and dark that you almost don't see it. I'm sure on the camera you don't see that. And so this part stays light right in there. This stays, I'm using a thirsty brush. I'm going to put a little bit of this, takes a little of that light out there. Thirsty brush is great to use, and what you're doing is you're pulling the pigment and you're moving it around. I'm pulling it out of the paper and bringing it and pushing it over. So that's a light then. And this is all wet up here, so you got to realize that you got to really use enough pigment to make it stop flowing all over the place, because I need to have the edge soft. So that's how come it's all wet, and that's how you do watercolors. Wet into wet is do it from a wet wash that gives you an instant soft edge. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to blend. It just gives you the soft edge that you're looking for. And so now let's get some really dark in here. And again, this is not very colorful when it comes to the black, using black like that, but then I put color into it. I apply color into the hat then while it's wet, and that edge is really hard because there's a lot of pigment right there. It comes all the way down, and I'm going to go into my turquoise colors. Like I said, I'm using 3 basic colors: the turquoise, the red, and a lot of my orange reds. I'm kind of sticking with those as being my my color scheme. I'm using the Scarlet Lake, and then over here it gets a little light. The hat itself is kind of light right here and colorful. And let's put a little bit of orange in there. And as you notice, I'm mixing all colors together. I'm not stopping from mixing the gouache to the to the watercolor. No, there's no difference really in the fact that it's still just all pigment. It's all watercolor pigment. It's all water-based, and so I don't have to worry about that part. I do just have to worry that some is more opaque and some is less opaque, is transparent. Coming down to the right side now, but look at all this granulation that happened in here. You probably can't see that, but there's tons of granulation from the pigment. And then this part of the hat, I'm going to take a thirsty brush. I'm just going to pull out a little bit of this tip of the hat right here. Just pull a little bit of that out of there just to get a little bit of look of, it's wet, and so I can just pull out a little bit right there. Here, I'm going to put a little bit of color in there, and let's see, the hat goes down dark right here, and the hat underneath here is dark, and so again I'm going to take a little bit of black, let's see, what should I put into that black, a little bit of purple, a little bit more colorful, and then this whole edge in front here, and come around here right to the ear, like one shorter than the ear. Bring it down, wet it, so I get a nice soft edge. This is the top of the hat, and that could be a hard edge, that's okay. Inside here, it's a little messy, so I'll take a little bit of water and then just let this come together. Just bleed that together. Water blends itself. You don't have to do any blending when you're doing watercolor. If you just give it water, it blends itself. I have a little bit of this violet right here because my light right here is a little bit too light. It just bugs me right now, so I'm going to put this in there right away. While I see it, I think this has to be a little bit darker, so a bit more pigment, a little bit more dark in my shadow pattern right there. Alright, so now underneath his shirt here, his tie. Let's keep on going up here. I don't want that to dry too bad and too hard. I'll just make this nice color up here. Look at some of these washes that are in there. Just, boy, I wonder if you can even see that. There's some really amazing textures going on in there. Some red worm up here. This just has to be really dark. You know, you have to get dark, and a really good way of doing dark is using your gouache, watercolor gouache. It's a big thing nowadays, and I don't mind mixing them together. And I have one class that I'm teaching. My next class of that is going to be down in Florida. And actually next Wednesday I am in Lamont, Illinois. So if you're in Lamont, Illinois on this coming Wednesday, I will be doing a demonstration how to plein air paint with my plein air setup basically, and on board, and so that'll be at Lamont at 7 at their local library, Lamont Library, for the Lamont Art League, I think it's called, or Lamont Art League, I think. I'll be putting that in my newsletter. So right now you can't really see that this is a cane, that he's resting on a cane, because I think I'm not at my detail stage yet. This is still my large areas. I'm still not at my detail step. A little red in there. And this is his little vest. This is his vest. Okay, so of course that's too light, right? I mean, it's going to be, but I don't do it now because otherwise I don't get that nice sharp edge. I'll put that in there later when it's dry. So now I gotta look, I look at for my big parts. So that's my big mediums and darks. I've got that pretty much done now. And so now I can go in and start getting, well, actually his whole wrist right here is a little bit more into the dark. So I'm just gonna darken this a little bit to get the lighting look right. A little bit darker here. Side of his cuff, his shirt cuff. Get that a little bit darker. Let's put a little bit of our color scheme in there. So I got to put a little bit of this color maybe into the side of the shadow side. And this seems to go this way. I forgot his thumb right here. Notice that I didn't put his thumb in. This is his thumb. Why am I using such a big brush for that? Alright, time for details. Time for details. Last step. And that's going in and just looking at your photograph and copying what you see in the photograph, basically. And then I will be putting in some opaque shapes. There's his thumb. A little bit more of his fingers, trying to figure out his fingers. Do more of the shape of his hand. It's kind of like off, like, oh, I see. There's one finger too back here. Let's go right into some of the dark of his cane. He's got a little cane right here. this, I think you're saying that's too rounded, so I'm probably going to have to make that a little bit harder edged, so that you get a little more hard edge here. Goes up. And bring the dark down here together so you cannot see the difference between where the hand starts and hand stops. This then is the cane. Losing edges is also good. I mean, it's always good to try to lose some edges so that you don't see exactly what's going on in certain parts, but parts that are important, they come forward, that is important, so it all depends on what you're painting at that moment. The cane is kind of important, and I'm going to be using some lighter colors and actually opaque colors to go in and get highlights. Maybe a little bit of his hand.